Snow gathers in slow, muffled heaps against a fence that stretches farther than the eye can follow. Farther, even, than the official maps of North Korea are willing to admit. A watchtower clicks awake as dusk settles, its lamp slicing across a frozen valley. The beam sweeps over structures arranged with military precision: barracks, work sites, half-buried guard posts. The air is still, but nothing here is quiet. North Korea does not call these places concentration camps. The regime labels them kwanliso, control zones. But names are irrelevant to the people inside. For them, these districts are both cradle and coffin, a place where entire bloodlines can enter and where almost no one leaves alive. The country's prison apparatus splits along two main branches. There are the kwanliso, re-education camps, brutal, punishing, but theoretically bounded by fixed sentences. Fixed in North Korea might mean 10 years for stealing a handful of corn or listening to a foreign broadcast. But the truly feared centers are the kwanliso, the political penal colonies. These are the camps no one is supposed to return from. Here, imprisonment is often intergenerational, a sentence carried through the regime's doctrine of guilt by association. Yodok. It means a father's whispered criticism can doom 3 generations. A grandfather's comment becomes the reason his grandson grows up behind wire punishment, becomes hereditary, built into the bloodstream like a curse. Because the government denies these camps exist, the map of them has been constructed piece by piece through shadows, testimonies, and satellite imagery. Camp 14 in Kachon, one of the most infamous, where forced labor mines claw into the mountains. Camp 15, Yodok, once partially exposed through escapees' drawings. Camp 16 in Hwasong, vast enough to swallow a city. Camp 25 near Chongjin, sealed so tightly that almost nothing leaks out. Their signatures look the same from space: terraced fields carved into barren hillsides, gray factory roofs, clusters of guard housing, narrow corridors of fencing, mine belts, watchtowers at measured intervals. And always, the perimeter, a line drawn not just across land, but across the lives of anyone unlucky enough to be born. Inside these borders, hunger rules everything. Survivors describe days structured around quotas more than time. Coal by the ton, timber by the stack, stone by the cartload. Work doesn't merely exhaust, it dictates whether a prisoner eats a ration of thin corn porridge or nothing at all. A missed quota is not a failure. It is an offense. Food becomes a weapon, and starvation becomes a language the regime speaks fluently. A former prisoner once described learning mathematics by counting the stripes on his own back. 5 lashes for speaking, 10 for slowing down, 20 if the guard needed to prove something. Another survivor remembers winters so bitter, the air seemed to freeze inside her lungs. Our breath crystallized on the blankets, she said. The quilts were so thin they felt like paper. Children learn the rules early. Never be the slowest worker. Never be the hungriest thief. Never ask where someone went. The answer is always the same: nowhere you're allowed to follow. Inside the camps, labor divides the survivors into categories the state never writes down, but enforces with brutal efficiency. Men are sent into coal mines, where the air turns thick and metallic, where a single mistake with a cart or pickaxe can cost a limb or a life. The tunnels are humid in summer, suffocating in winter, and structured around a single, unbreakable rule: meet the quota or be punished. The mines do not pause for injuries, they simply absorb them. Women are assigned to fields, logging areas, textile sheds, or bean-curing houses, where the chemical fumes sting the nose and burn the lungs. Their hands crack in the winter cold, bleeding into the frozen soil they're forced to turn over. Many work through pregnancies, bruises hidden under threadbare uniforms, until the guards decide their condition has become an inconvenience. Teenagers, hardened before they reach adulthood, become laborers with responsibilities equal to any grown worker. Teenage boys join logging teams, hauling timber through mountain paths slick with ice. Teenage girls sort beans, pick stones, pack fabrics, or work in barns that reek of ammonia. Childhood ends early in the camps, sometimes before it even begins. And the children? They grow up learning that hunger is a law of nature. They start with tasks, small enough for small hands, collecting kindling, dragging tree branches, gathering edible plants, or digging through the soil for roots. By their early teens, they face full quotas. Injuries are constant: crushed fingers, torn skin, frostbitten toes. A broken limb is not a medical crisis, it's a work interruption. And work interruptions have consequences. Food inside the camps is more than sustenance. It is the core mechanism of control. A prisoner's ration is a tin bowl of watery corn gruel, sometimes supplemented with pickled cabbage. If supplies haven't spoiled, protein is nearly non-existent. Desperation forces creativity. Pine bark pounded into paste, acorns boiled until bitter skins soften, rodents trapped in secret corners of barracks, insects swallowed in handfuls. Guards classify stealing from state fields as anti-state activity. The punishment ranges from public beatings to confinement in standing cells, narrow concrete boxes where prisoners cannot sit or lie down. For days at a time, repeat offenders may be executed. Sometimes the executions are staged at the worksite, where guards gather prisoners and read a forced confession aloud. Gunshots follow. Work resumes. Survivors describe how the cycle of hunger and terror turns every prisoner into both bystander and participant. "You didn't dare look at the body," one former detainee said. "But the guards looked at us. They wanted to know who flinched." Every rule inside a camp is fluid, shifting at the whim of the guards. A moment of distraction, a misplaced tool, a whispered complaint, each can become grounds for discipline. A bowed head becomes wrong attitude. A cracked shovel becomes sabotage. A delayed response becomes resistance. Punishment takes many forms. Stress positions held for hours, beatings with sticks, pipes, or shovel handles, public humiliation, days spent crouched in a half-standing cell, forced witness of executions. The black-walled punishment cells are among the most feared. Prisoners cannot stand fully upright. They cannot lie down. Sleep becomes a luxury measured in seconds. After 2 days, a survivor recalled, your mind stops working after 5. You are not sure you are still human. Sexual violence is an open secret. Guards take women for inspections, a euphemism survivors translate bluntly. Assault pregnancies often result in forced abortions. Babies who are born face the same starvation rations adults can barely survive. Infant mortality is so common that some prisoners describe newborns as temporary lives. Everything inside the camp serves one purpose: to make the prisoners believe escape is impossible, hope is dangerous, and survival depends entirely on obedience. Information about the camps escapes North Korea the same way prisoners do: slowly, painfully, and through paths marked by danger. The regime insists these camps do not exist, yet their outlines are carved into the landscape with a clarity the government cannot fully conceal. Satellite images reveal patterns that match testimony. Guard posts added, perimeters expanded, buildings reconstructed after landslides, or flooding mines grow wider. Logging areas recede deeper into the mountains. What satellites cannot show is the sound of the place. The coughs from barracks, where tuberculosis spreads unchecked. The clatter of ore carts, the barked orders from guards, the silence that follows a beating. That part comes from the people who escaped. Their stories form a fragile but undeniable record. Survivors describe routines that combine military precision with arbitrary terror. A bell wakes the camp before dawn. Prisoners line up in rows, heads down, bodies weighing little more than bone and willpower. Roll call is a mixture of fear and calculation. If someone is missing, the search begins. If a body is discovered, the day becomes a ceremony of punishment. Then comes the march to work sites, mines, mountainsides, fields. The day's labor stretches until the sun disappears or the quota is met, whichever comes later. What makes the testimonies so powerful is not just their content, but their consistency. A woman who grew up in Camp 15 describes the same punishment cells. A man from Camp 14 remembers. A guard from Camp 18, after defecting, outlines regulations identical to those described by former prisoners. Rations tied to work performance, mandatory self-criticism sessions, execution protocols. Their memories align like overlapping maps. And yet, testimony alone is not enough. North Korea understands the power of denial. It knows that in a world flooded with information, the loudest lie often survives longer than the quiet truth. That is why the regime seals its borders so tightly. Radios are preset to state frequencies. Tuning them elsewhere is treason. Phones require registration, and private travel demands written permits stamped by local authorities. A camp can exist just one valley over, and still no one dares speak its name. China's role adds another layer of silence. As North Korea's largest neighbor and closest ally, it repatriates most escapees, rather than granting them asylum. For those returned, the consequences are catastrophic: interrogation, torture, and in many cases, transfer to a kwanliso. Many survivors describe their most traumatic experiences not inside the camps themselves, but during the repatriation process, where guards demanded confessions, beat them for imagined infractions, and sorted them into categories of political risk. International pressure tries to force cracks in the wall. The United Nations has compiled extensive reports based on interviews, satellite imagery, and defector accounts, concluding that the regime commits crimes against humanity. NGOs release coordinates and yearly updates, tracing new construction and shifts in camp boundaries. Some organizations collect testimonies like historical treasures, knowing that the regime's secrecy might one day collapse and evidence will be needed. But accountability is complicated. North Korea's nuclear program gives it leverage. Sanctions squeeze the population more than the elite. Diplomacy becomes a game played with selective access and strategic cooperation. And still, somewhere in the mountains of South Pyongan Province or North Hamgyong, a prisoner wakes before dawn, unaware that the world is arguing about their existence. For the rare few who escape to South Korea, the trauma does not end at the border. They arrive malnourished, many unable to read or write, because education inside the camps is minimal or non-existent. Some have never seen a city, others have never spoken freely. Psychological scars run deep: nightmares, hypervigilance, guilt over leaving loved ones behind. One survivor described what freedom felt like. "I slept on the floor for years. Beds felt wrong. Silence felt dangerous. I waited every night for someone to shout my number." Another admitted that the hardest part of living in the outside world was learning to choose in the camp, she said. Choice was a crime. Their testimonies become a mirror the world struggles to look into, because acknowledging them means admitting that in the 21st century, a system of slavery and hereditary imprisonment still thrives, largely unchallenged, behind barbed wire. The question the world keeps asking is simple. How does such a system survive in an age of satellites, smartphones, and global diplomacy? The answer is layered. Part fear, part geopolitics, part indifference, part exhaustion. North Korea thrives on the paradox of visibility without access. The camps are large enough to appear in satellite photos, but remote enough that no outsider can step inside. Their existence is both undeniable and unfathomable. Everyone sees the fences, yet no one can cross them. This duality allows Pyongyang to shrug off accusations as fabrications, while continuing to operate facilities the size of entire districts. The regime's control over information is absolute. Radios soldered to government frequencies. Schools teaching that loyalty is survival. Neighborhood surveillance committees reporting the smallest hint of dissent. Inside such a system, even imagining a different life becomes dangerous. For prisoners born inside the camps, the borders around them are not political. They are reality itself. International law tries to answer these abuses with inquiries, resolutions, and declarations. The UN Commission of Inquiry in 2014 detailed forced labor, torture, starvation, and political executions, calling them crimes against humanity. But laws require enforcement, and enforcement requires access. North Korea offers none. Without access, words fall into the gap between moral outrage and practical limitation. Aid groups push for humanitarian corridors. Governments impose sanctions targeting elites, hoping the pressure cracks the system. NGOs record testimonies, geolocate structures, compile timelines, building an archive meant for a future moment when the fences finally fall and accountability becomes possible. Until that day, the world witnesses the camps through the fragments carried by survivors. A drawn map, a whispered memory, a scar that never healed. Their stories are the closest thing to a crack in the concrete walls. One survivor put it simply, "The world doesn't need to imagine hell. We built it. We lived there." He paused before adding, "All I want is for people to believe us. If they believe us, the camps will not stay hidden forever." That is why these testimonies matter, not because they change North Korea overnight, but because they ensure the camps cannot remain invisible. Every satellite image, every defector's story, every report filed at the United Nations is a reminder that the fences exist, and that silence is a choice. The camps endure behind mountains and propaganda, but the world is watching. The question is no longer whether they are real. The question is what humanity will do with the truth.